Newly released body cam video shows the moment police officers saw former President Trump's shooter right before the assassination attempt. Let's watch. It's been nearly a month since the assassination attempt at Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Both the former Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle and the acting director Ronald Rowe have testified before lawmakers. But there are still many questions that remain about the extent of law enforcement's failures that day as investigations continue. The new footage shows how 5 officers, for about 2.5 minutes, gathered around the warehouse where the gunman was. It establishes that officers had determined the gunman's location, frantically tried to find a way to get on the roof, and determined he was armed. YouTuber and political commentator Benny Johnson traveled to the site of the assassination attempt and teamed up with Republican Representative Corey Mills to dig deeper into what happened. Let's watch.
How was Crooks allowed to get so close to the president in the first place? How was he allowed to fire 8 shots? We investigated his sniper nest to find out. The exact location where Crooks fired his weapon is easy to find because once you are on the rooftop, it is still stained with his blood.
Yes, this is it right here.
This is it right here?
You can see the blood trail that comes down.
Got it. Got it. So they're right where Trump was.
Right.
They're where Trump was right there.
As your basic training boot camp soldier, that they make twice this distance shot to pass boot camp with iron sights, not with a red dot, not with a scope. With any magnification or any type of a, red dot sight, it's that much easier of a shot.
Johnson was also joined by Republican Representative Eli Crane, who broke down why one sniper's nest was left empty during the shooting.
SWAT sniper team was stationed on the 2nd floor of the AGR building with perfect overwatch of the roof. The snipers in this location could have and should have easily been able to engage Crooks before he ever came close to scope sight of Trump. The acting director of the Secret Service says he does not know what happened in this location, but we do. Who was stationed up there? And did they see the shooter? Why weren't they engaging?
Once there was a suspicious individual reported, one of them came down, left the room that they were conducting overwatch in, went down to, I think, walk around the perimeter, see if he could find him. Tried to come back in the building. The key card wasn't working, and so he called the other guy that was up in the room. The other guy left his post to come down to let him in. We're being told that that's when the shots were taken.
So this is the worst possible timing for a local SWAT team or sniper team. So,
Independent journalist Richie McGinnis, who helped shoot that documentary, also wondered why snipers weren't better positioned. Let's take a look.
All right, I got a quick question for you guys. If that's where the sniper was, and that's the water tower up there, then why wasn't the Secret Service up there? Because it's pretty easy to see what's down here from up there. So I'm just asking questions here, if anybody could help me out. Thanks, really appreciate it. This is where Trumpo was. Hold on one sec. He's right over here. That's it. 150 yards.
Richie joins us now to discuss it all. Richie, great to see you, and thank you so much for actually going to the site and getting this footage. It seems like, it's only been a month since this happened, and a lot of people have already forgotten about it. I don't think there's any way to say this other than this was a massive security failure, and I guess the remaining question now is, was it intentional or just pure incompetence?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're actually there and you see the security perimeter that was set up, and how close and how easy it was for anybody who was not secure, didn't go through a magnetometer or anything like that, to just walk up to that chain link fence that you saw in my video. They were within 100 yards of where Trump was speaking, within direct line of sight, and they could have brought, people brought coolers for beers, but anybody could have brought anything in that cooler. And Crooks was actually right behind them on that barn. And that newly released body cam footage, the question that I'm asking, which is the question that the officer asked in that footage, is I asked them to secure this roof back on Tuesday, and the shooting happened on Saturday. So if the local PD were raising these questions, 5 days ahead of time, why is it that nobody was looking down on that roof at that particular moment when Trump was speaking?
Right, and we've also heard reports that the Secret Service apparently skipped a briefing with the local law enforcement officials they had there prior to the rally. So there was a complete communication breakdown, it seems, between the Secret Service and then the individuals who knew the area and were familiar with this security perimeter. I don't know how that even happens.
Absolutely, and there was also a panel that was done with the local police department, and they stated that they communicated these things with Secret Service, and Secret Service skipped a briefing prior to the speech. So you have to ask yourself the question of, is this just negligence? Does animus towards Trump, because obviously Mayorkas is the one, a Joe Biden appointee is the one who's overseeing the security. Why exactly were all of these things overlooked? And is it just gross negligence, or does that animus play into it at all?
Yeah, I think that is really a key question here. And we've seen that the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle, stepped down from her position after immense political pressure. But Ronald Rowe is now taken over, and he was also, tangentially in charge of this security detail.
Yeah, and it was obvious during the hearing that he was not filled in on a bunch of key details, like why was there no one in that window that directly overlooks that roof? And the question that I asked in that video, that water tower, not only does it overlook the particular building where Crooks was stationed and where he fired from, but also it has a line of sight of basically the entire area. So, if I were 15 years old playing paintball, I would be able to secure a better perimeter than was secured around the former president of the United States. And I have zero background in anything other than Call of Duty and playing airsoft and paintball. So,
well, it all seems pretty common sense if you just take a look at the videos that you took from that location. As you were walking through with these congressmen and Benny Johnson, what was the most surprising thing that you learned as you're going through the failures that day?
Well, actually, so you can see me, I was the one standing where Trump was on stage. So as I was standing there and looking out to Benny, out on the roof where Crooks was in the exact position, with my naked eye, I could see them walking around, and then when he laid down, I could actually even still see him. And we were on the phone, can you see me now? Can you see me now? Yeah, I can see you. And so even with the naked eye from where Trump was standing, you could see somebody on that roof, whether they were in the prone position or not. And obviously, the Secret Service claimed that roof was too sloped.
Right.
I actually went up on the roof where the Secret Service snipers that everybody saw on that red barn. That roof is much more sloped than the one that Crooks was on. So that's, I don't know where that answer came from, but anybody who was even within 100 yards of those two roofs could have determined that, that's not true.
I think that was probably one of the answers that helped dig Cheadle's grave, for lack of a better term. But from that vantage point of being where Trump was standing on the stage and being able to see them moving around on the roof, whether they're laying down or not, it begs the question, I think, of why he wasn't pulled from the stage as soon as this guy was spotted. And yet there was, a 15-minute period where he was allowed to run around on this roof with no one thinking to either confront him or at the very least make sure that Trump was pulled to safety.
What's the point in having local police there to help secure the area if they're not on any kind of similar communications channel? Because apparently they weren't, because they were running around for minutes before he fired those shots, and they were surrounding that building, and the Secret Service, whether or not they had eyes on him, and they were wondering whether or not, this is an actual threat. He had an AR-15, which is it's not like he had a small weapon. So just a lot of different breakdowns, and after actually walking across the site, I have way more questions than I do answers. Let's just leave it at that.
Sure, and because you have a background in video production, there are a couple of other questions I want to get at, one of which is there's been this conspiracy theory floating around that what actually hit Trump's ear was a piece of teleprompter that was struck by the bullet. You worked with a lot of teleprompters in your day. Do you think it is at all possible that it was a piece of glass and not a bullet that hit Trump?
Well, I've worked with a lot of teleprompters, and I've also seen what an AR-15 can do at close range in Kenosha. And I can tell you right now, when the shooting happened, I obviously jumped onto Twitter to try to gather as much information as I could, and that conspiracy theory was instantly debunked with the simple photograph of Trump on the ground after the shooting with both teleprompters fully intact. So I don't know too much about AR-15s, but I know enough that if you shoot something that's glass with an AR-15, it's probably not going to remain intact.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up Kenosha because that was where I wanted to go next, because for our viewers who don't know, you were on the ground during the riots in the summer of 2020 and unfortunately played a more personal role with one of the individuals who was killed that day by Kyle Rittenhouse. But you mentioned to me in one of our other conversations that you think that politics could have played a role in the lack of National Guard support for a few days in both Minnesota and then in Wisconsin. Can you talk a little bit more about what the timeline was like there and how it might compare to what we're seeing now with this assassination attempt?
Yeah, it was the same story in all the different protest zones we traveled to, from Portland, Seattle, Kenosha. You know, basically you have a Democratic governor or a Democratic mayor in these cities, and they say, Trump, you're not going to bring in your feds. We're not going to let you, determine how we run things in this city. And as a result, the police were completely overwhelmed. On that night in Kenosha, there were National Guard, but they were not in a large number, and all they did was protect the courthouse while the rest of the city was literally burned. And the second question I have after experiencing what happened in Kenosha is, during the moment of the shooting, there was a drone in the air directly above where the shooting took place, and there was also a Cessna, an FBI Cessna plane with infrared cameras filming the riots that were going on, the buildings burning down below. And if they had aerial surveillance over a riot in Kenosha, then why is it that the request for aerial surveillance over the site where Trump was speaking was rejected? I mean, I flew multiple drones over burning cars and over all these different protest zones, and I know how easy it is to put a drone up in the air. So the question is, why is it that they weren't allowed to just, power up a drone and put it over while Trump was speaking?
Right, especially since there were some locals there who even offered their own services to make that happen. I think you're right. There are a lot more questions than answers based on recent history. I'm not confident that we're going to get those answers, unfortunately, but thanks to you and to Benny and to all of the other independent journalists who are trying to make sure we get as informed about this as possible. Richie McGinnis, thanks so much for joining us here on Rising.
Thanks for having me.